Today I want to discuss a series of events which have conspired primarily through Twitter over the last week, surrounding 3 articles concerning A. The menstrual health of women, B. J.K. Rowling's response to anti-trans and TERF claims against her, and C. Rowling's experience with domestic abuse. Initially, these 3 topics don't seem to connect, but as of recent, they have become intertwined through the discourse that has formed surrounding the author. In this video, I'm going to be running through the events that have taken place and the general public's opinion on them, which has been shared on Twitter. I'll be presenting both sides of the argument so you can get a full picture of what's happening and so that you can make your own judgments based on the situation. For this video, I'm going to remain as unbiased as possible. Any material that I have directly quoted, including text from the articles and Twitter posts, will be on the screen, and links to the original articles can be found in the description of this video. On the 28th of May, the website Divax published an article titled, Opinion, Creating a More Equal Post-COVID-19 World for People Who Menstruate. This title would be the beginning of the drama that was to stir around Rowling this week. To summarise, the article discusses menstrual health and sanitation for women and girls during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially those who rely on programs that provide menstrual products which has since been closed. I recommend reading the full article yourself at the end of the video, but to give you a little background, we'll read the beginning together. COVID-19 highlights the vulnerable among us across the globe, those who are most vulnerable because of the crowded conditions they live in, those who must continue working despite the threat of infection, and those who cannot absorb the shock of the economic impact of closed economies and quarantine. Importantly, advocates are calling attention to the many gendered aspects of the pandemic, including increased vulnerabilities to gender-based violence during lockdowns and the risks faced by primary caretakers, particularly women in the household and healthcare workers, approximately 75% of which are women. An estimated 1.8 billion girls, women, and gender non-binary persons menstruate, and this has not stopped because of the pandemic. They still require menstrual materials, safe access to toilets, soap water, and private spaces in the face of lockdown living conditions that have eliminated privacy for many populations. On the 6th of June, Rowling responded with this post, asking, why is the term people who menstruate when you could simply say women? To this, she faced a mixed response from the public. Among those who opposed her, many claimed she was anti-trans and a TERF, while others were simply upset that she didn't consider those women who had gone through menopause or those with an IUD, asking, are we still women? However, many agreed with her issue with the phrasing of the article title, stating that if her intention was to defend the position of biological sex and defend womanhood, then she was correct in doing so. I'm going to read you a few of these tweets from different viewpoints, just so you can get a general picture of what was said. So in conclusion, J.K. Rowling is a bully, a hate monger, a liar, a blatant transphobe, and a danger to the well-being of kids who are trans and LGBT. I have been saying this for several years. There are just some experiences that biological born women have that trans women cannot relate to. It's the same with birthing people. No, it's birthing women. This is a biological event that a man does not experience. I don't menstruate, I have an IUD. My mother doesn't menstruate, she's gone through menopause. People who have anorexia nervosa don't menstruate. Trans women don't menstruate. There's a reason they didn't say women. I will leave a couple more on the screen for you to pause the video and read, but if you feel like this doesn't give you a clear enough picture, Rowling's Twitter is public so you can take a look for yourself. In light of the backlash against her first post, Rowling goes on to try and explain her viewpoint on sex and gender, which was of course met by similar comments. This is what she said in her defending posts. If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth. The idea that women like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is a nonsense. I respect every trans person's right to live in any way they feel authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it is hateful to say so. On the 10th of June, Rowling published an article further defending and explaining her viewpoint, captioning the post TERF Wars. The article is quite long, so I will be focusing on a few key parts to try and create a more concise articulation of this. But once again, I recommend reading the whole thing yourself to get the full understanding. She begins by explaining how last December she tweeted her support for Mayor Forstater, who lost her job over some tweets that were deemed transphobic. However, Rowling's interest in trans-related issues existed prior to this incident. All the time I've been researching and learning, accusations and threats from trans activists have been bubbling in my Twitter timeline. This is initially triggered by a like when I started taking an interest in gender identity and transgender matters. I began screenshotting comments that interested me as a way of reminding myself what I wanted to research later. On one occasion, I absent-mindedly liked instead of screenshotted. This single like was deemed evidence of wrongthink, and a persistent, low level of harassment began. Months later, I compounded my accidental like crime by following Magdalene Burns on Twitter. Magdalene was an immensely brave young feminist and lesbian who was dying of an aggressive brain tumour. I followed her because I wanted to contact her directly, which I succeeded in doing. However, as Magdalene is a great believer in the importance of biological sex, and to believe lesbians should be called bigots for not dating trans women with penises, dots were joined in the heads of Twitter trans activists, and the level of social media abuse increased. Rowling explains how this led to her being deemed a TERF by trans activists, that being an acronym for a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, and according to her, many women have been labelled as TERFs despite having nothing to do with radical feminism. Rowling states there are 5 reasons as to why she is worried about the new trans activism. Firstly, I have a charitable trust that focuses on alleviating social deprivation in Scotland, with a particular emphasis on women and children. Among other things, my trust supports projects for female prisoners and the survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. I fund medical research into MS, a disease that behaves very differently in men and women. It's been clear to me for a while that the new trans activism is having, or is likely to have, if all demands are met, a significant impact on many of the causes I support, because it's pushing to erode the legal definition of sex and replace it with gender. The second reason I have is that I'm an ex-teacher and the founder of a children's charity, which gives me an interest in both education and safeguarding. Like many others, I have deep concerns about the effect the trans right movement is having on both. The third is that, as a Butch-banned author, I'm interested in freedom of speech and have publicly defended it, even unto Donald Trump. The fourth is where things start to get truly personal. I'm concerned about the huge explosion of young women wishing to transition, and also about the increasing number who seem to be detransitioning, returning to their original sex, because they regret taking steps that have, in some cases, altered their bodies irrevocably and taken away their fertility. Some they decided to transition after realising they were same-sex attracted, and that transitioning was partly driven by homophobia, either in society or in their families. Which brings me to the fifth reason I'm deeply concerned about the consequences of the current trans activism. I've been in the public eye now for over 20 years and have never talked publicly about being a domestic abuse or sexual assault survivor. This isn't because I'm ashamed of those things happening to me, but because they're traumatic to revisit and remember. I also feel protective of my daughter from my first marriage. I didn't want to claim sole ownership to the story that belongs to her too. However, a short while ago I asked her how she'd feel if I was publicly honest about that part of my life, and she encouraged me to go ahead. Progressing further through the article, there appears to me a conflict between feminism and trans activism. On the one hand, we may infer that the language used in the article for the phrasing of people who menstruate is dehumanizing to women. In this case, the rephrasing of this is more liberating to women, and therefore we consider this a feminist stance. However, on the side of trans activism, the original phrasing can be the most appropriate language to use in order to be inclusive of trans individuals that identify as male. To these individuals, the language that the article uses can be more liberating, and so there is an unavoidable conflict which we have to confront. If these two groups are to take these views, then it seems that they are unable to coincide. The inclusive language that calls female people menstruators and people with vulvas strikes many women as dehumanizing and demeaning. I understand why trans activists consider this language to be appropriate and kind, but for those of us who've had degrading slurs spat at us by violent men, it's not neutral, it's hostile and alienating. Furthermore, Rowling expresses her disappointment with Scotland's gender recognition plans, which allow men to legally become women simply by stating that they are one, without any need for sex change or hormone treatment. She believes this poses a threat to women and girls, especially in single-sex spaces such as changing rooms. She ends her post by explaining her comments on the original article and the backlash she received. Late on Saturday evening, scrolling through children's pictures before I went to bed, I forgot the first rule to Twitter: never, ever expect a nuanced conversation, and reacted to what I felt was degrading language about women. I spoke up about the importance of sex and have been paying the price ever since. I was transphobic, I was a cunt, a bitch, a TERF. I deserved cancelling, punching to death. This is finalised by the statement of her opinion that she believes this new trans-activism movement is dangerous, and expresses that she doesn't want sympathy concerning the new exposure of her past abuse, but instead wants empathy for women who want their concerns to be heard. What I wanted to do was take a look at some of the comments on this article, but there were no comment section on the website itself, and Rowling disabled the comment section in her tweet, so there was none directly from the article. However, looking in the hashtag #IStandWithJKR tag on Twitter, you can get a general understanding of the opinions of this on both sides, which generally are similar to the ones on the original post. We move onwards now to the final instalment of this trilogy, which addresses the claims of domestic abuse that Rowling made in her own article. On the 12th of June, the story of Rowling's domestic abuse was on the front page of the Sun newspaper and was instantly subject to criticism by the public. Even those who were disgraced by Rowling's position before now defended her against the paper, though most of these individuals still made it clear that they disagreed with her supposed anti-trans message. In this article, Rowling's ex-husband admits that he slapped her and that he's not sorry, but claims he did not abuse her. To summarise very briefly, the article gives the reader a bit of background on the divorced couple before exposing the obtained statement from the ex-husband in question. Yes, the Sun had tracked down the ex-husband and asked for a statement. When pressed last night, Arantes told the Sun, "It was a long time ago and I don't want to talk. I don't speak to Joanne anymore and I don't want to have this conversation. I don't care about it. What she says is up to her, it's her responsibility, not mine. There was no sustained abuse." And that is where the series of events comes to a close. I'm sorry if I've missed anything important in this. I've tried to be concise as possible while still including all the details, but feel free to correct me on any mistakes. Like I said at the beginning, the links to all the articles will be in the description if you want to read them fully. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's given you a better understanding of what's happened surrounding J.K. Rowling, or that you've at least found it interesting. I was sort of following this since it began. I didn't take any screenshots or keep any notes until after the Sun article was published, which is when I started thinking about this video, and I thought it would be interesting to just have a look at this. I hope to see you in another video soon. Bye bye for now.